We are sticking in the second tier for the entire episode this week, and we are going to talk about Mick McCarthy today. So if you want a full lowdown on Big Mick and all of his, all of his flow states, his personality types, and all the things that make him tick, then you can go back, of course, and listen to our episode on Mick McCarthy, which is available on our feed, and you can also find the clip on YouTube as well. But what we're going to talk about, Mike, is the fact that Cardiff are in a bit of a rut at the moment, a heavy defeat to Blackburn yesterday as we record, and things are not quite going to plan. He came in, he breezed them up the table, didn't achieve promotion, didn't make the playoffs, but everything was optimistic then. Things have taken a turn. So Mick McCarthy and steering a ship to safety, he's very good at the bottom end of the table, scrapping away, but elevating Cardiff to the next level becomes a bit of a problem for him, doesn't it?
Yeah, well, I think when he first walked into the club, again, we just talk about honeymoon spells like with Steve Cooper. Is you come into the club and by definition there's going to be something wrong and low hanging fruit and easy things to fix. And I think Mick McCarthy's very quick on the uptake, huge amounts of experience, and didn't have much trouble in getting things moving again. And just being a breath of fresh air, walking into the club, a new voice and lifting spirits and getting people doing the basics well again and not feeling too down on themselves. So I think there was plenty of low-hanging fruit there. And then last season, the international break, the final international break in March, I think did for Cardiff's promotion push, their top six push. McCarthy, of course, very in tune with what international breaks mean on both sides of the fence, having come out of the Republic of Ireland job prior to taking the Cardiff job, and knows, there's Euro 2020 on the horizon. This is no ordinary international break in March. A lot of his players go away. They get worked harder than usual because it's the last break before a tournament meet-up, last break before the squads are named. And he knew it was a big deal to a lot of them players in that Cardiff squad. So I think that when he turned around afterwards and said that didn't help us, and that was probably the reason why in the end we didn't make the top six, I think, yeah, absolutely, you've got to give him that. But I think the problems that Cardiff have got now are McCarthy's problems. And I think all the excuses are out the window. And I think it's been a very, very disappointing start to the season. There seems to be a lack of imagination about the way that they're playing, a lack of tactical identity, other than the fact that they've got this extraordinary set-piece threat and how big and physical they are. But I just feel like they're a little bit over-reliant on that.
So Mick McCarthy comes in, and we talked about this on the Mick McCarthy pod. You say breath of fresh air. Indeed, that's exactly what he brings. Players clearly enjoy working with him. He adds certainly a lot of fun to the environment on the training ground. He makes you work hard, of course he does, but you can have a laugh as well at the same time. And he, I guess, empowers individuals, but correct me if I'm wrong, Mike, but mainly the collective, I guess. But he's very good on a one-to-one basis as well. Is that something that can wear out quite easily? Do players see through all this after a short time? Because this is not the first time that things have gone quite sour quite quickly for Mick McCarthy.
I think it's about having both sides. Is the emotional, motivational side of the game, and is the logical, tactical side of the game, and the way you go about the actual job itself. And I think the problem for managers like Mick McCarthy, and this is interesting because there's been a bit of back and forth already this season about these old-timer managers, and when results are good, everybody's quick to point out, I remember Derek Adams did an interview just a couple of weeks ago, basically calling out these young super coaches that are being lauded now. That, everybody's after the next big thing with the new appointments, and you look at your Kenny Jackett's and your Mick McCarthy's and your Neil Warnock's, and the experience is being undervalued. But then suddenly there's a couple of bad results and it's the old timers are past it and all of this. I think McCarthy, this period coming up now, is going to have questions to answer, because I think there are genuine questions about, the type of football that Cardiff are playing. And I just think nowadays the game in the championship level is so many different styles, so many different approaches. And I think most teams, if got any ideas, any pretensions of getting into that top six, have to be a little bit adaptable and maybe change things up a little bit from week to week. And I don't think we're seeing that enough in McCarthy. And it's funny because, you cannot argue with Mick McCarthy's track record overall. But I was kind of having this conversation in a hangout call on Thursday night when we were discussing Cardiff then. And it was like, one of the things you have to look at is football moves in cycles. What has a manager done in the last 4 to 5 years? Not just what they've done in their careers, because of, and particularly the last 4 to 5 years, there's been a huge shift in tactical outlook in what the coaches are bringing, how many different coaches and types of styles of football we're seeing in the Championship. And, if you look at Mick McCarthy's track record on just the last 4 or 5 years alone, there's not an awful lot there to buy into. And now thinking back to the Ipswich fans who were widely sort of derided for their anti-Mick McCarthy stance because of the type of football he was playing. It was, be careful what you wish for, you'll end up relegated. Then obviously that comes to pass and everybody's pointing and laughing at Ipswich fans saying, look, everybody told you can't do without Mick McCarthy, that this is what happens. But ultimately what the Ipswich fans saw was a lack of invention, a lack of innovation in the type of football they were playing. And it was almost like it got to the point that they were happy to be relegated and start again with a clean slate than have another 4 or 5 years of the type of football that McCarthy was playing. I think now we're reaching a point where Mick McCarthy's got to seriously start answering these questions with, and just bringing a bit more flair that we used to see in his Wolves days or Sunderland when he was winning promotions. We're going back over a decade now. We need to see a bit more flair about the way his teams go about it and not just a reliance on how well they do the basics, the ugly side of the game, which he's unashamedly proud of, and how horrible they are to play against in that set piece threat.
I'm going to ask I've got a bit of a scattergun approach here, Mike. Again, I'm going to throw a couple of questions into the same sentence here. So Blackburn yesterday absolutely thumped Cardiff. Cardiff were second best in just about every department. Now, there's fans who have compared Tony Mowbray with Mick McCarthy on the sidelines in yesterday's game. They said Tony Mowbray was on his feet for the entire game, shouting instructions, whistling, ordering players around the pitch, whereas Mick McCarthy, head down, looking at his notepad, jotting, he could have been drawing, but we think he was jotting down tactical instructions. Tony Mowbray, of course, the winning manager, would go over to the fans and salute them. Mick McCarthy, just went straight down the tunnel afterwards. Cardiff fans are saying, look, we've travelled, over 900 miles already this season. We've watched some dreadful matches. The least you can do is come and say thank you to us for being there, for at least trying to cheer you on and trying to offer some encouragement. So from, an in-match point of view, they've compared Mowbray and Mick McCarthy. But there are others who are saying, well, hang on, Mick McCarthy's a bit older than Tony Mowbray, but there's not a significant difference. They're from roughly the same generation, yet Tony Mowbray keeps on getting more out of these younger players. He was being derided last season, but he's turned things around and he's got a new bunch of players and he's found another way to play with these guys. Whereas Mick McCarthy has got some new players, but he's not evolved at all from last season. So, you probably wouldn't compare them directly, personality type wise, but seeing as they met on Saturday, I found it a very interesting comparison between the two men.
Well, there is an interesting comparison because they both do use the same flow state, and it's about emotions and motivation and that side of the game, and not necessarily about the tactical structures and things like that. And it's interesting some of the observations you make. I mean, the picture you paint sounds like the first impression I'm getting there is, is this a regime that's going stale? Does McCarthy know that his days potentially might be numbered in this job, or is it just potentially an overreaction to one game and a day that's not particularly going well? I think we all know what we'd probably look like on the touchline in a game where you're getting hammered 5-1. But it was a very interesting game this weekend, and one I was keeping a close eye on because I thought this was two clubs that were going stale. And I thought it was two managers that were well, certainly in Mowbray's case, I'd have said, and I have been saying since the beginning of the season, I've been questioning whether Mowbray's passion is still there. There's been a few warning signs at Blackburn, and they've not really been setting things alight themselves this season. And I was looking at this game thinking, this is going to be interesting to see just how down both teams are. And if, I was expecting it to be a really turgid affair, a 0-0, 1-0 type of game. If set pieces were taken out of the equation, there really wouldn't be a lot to watch on offer. And to see Cardiff go down 5-1 in that manner is really alarming, because I don't think Blackburn have been setting the highest standards up to this point in any case, and certainly not by the standards of a Tony Mowbray team at the beginning of a season. So, yeah, those comparisons are interesting. I think it'll change from one season to the next anyway, or one patch of 6 to 8 matches to the next. You know, a team that's in good form, everybody looks at Tony Mowbray's body language and sees what they want to see, and then you give them a different set of results. My read on Tony Mowbray is prior to a result like this, which was much needed for him, was that he was the one that McCarthy probably still had the passion, and Mowbray was the one that I was beginning to doubt. You know, he's been in the job a few years now, and things haven't necessarily been going his way, and he's really hated the COVID thing and playing in empty stadiums, how lifeless it's felt. Losing his top goal scorer, Adam Armstrong, had been his big project for so many years. But then it sounds like because he's adapted to some degree and he's trying to find a new brand of football and he's working, you know, with a fresh set of youngsters, if their appetite's there, his appetite's there. And if those youngsters are responding to what he's asking, and, you know, maybe he is finding some passion in the novelty. With Mick McCarthy, I don't think novelty is a big thing for him. I think it's about, you know, when times are hard, you almost double down on what it is, the basics, the being horrible, the ugly side of the game, the second balls, and just being really horrible to play against. And I wonder in this day and age with a modern player, how much mileage that has. Because I think players almost to a man nowadays want to be educated, and they want to be educated in a way that even if I'm not in the team, am I learning day to day on the training ground? And I think Mick McCarthy's style is more about your attitude, how you carry yourself, the amount of buy-in that's there. You know, can I rely on you in the trenches to do whatever's required, you know, of you for the sake of the team, and those kinds of dynamics. And I just wonder, the longer this goes on and the more colourless Cardiff's football becomes, the more obsolete McCarthy becomes, it seems. And the more I can see, you know, that relationship starting to break down.
The dynamic must be interesting between the players and Mick McCarthy, because we suspect, and there's never been anything to suggest otherwise, that, you know, next to nearly every player gets on with Mick McCarthy on a human level. You know, a very, very respectable guy who's been there, done that, and got the t-shirt, and by all accounts, very, very enjoyable to be around. But I do remember a quote from pre-season. It's from Sean Morrison, the captain, and he responded to Uche Ikpeazu actually going to Middlesbrough, and he said he was the hardest player that we played against last season when he was at Wickham. And I spoke to the gaffer and I said, we should sign him. You know, he's a real pain. He would give us a different, you know, an edge, I guess. And then he said, I was very disappointed when he went somewhere else. Now, it just made me wonder, you know, are player suggestions being given the cold shoulder? Are players coming forward and saying, oh, actually, you know, not particularly signings, but are players maybe coming forward and saying, oh, have we thought about playing this way against this team? Or, you know, actually, I thought that I might be better in this position. And is it all being sort of turned away and, you know, Mick knows best? Do you think that could potentially be an issue?
There's a possibility, because the phrase used there, Mick knows best. I think McCarthy is unashamedly stubborn, and he'll say that himself in post-match interviews quite regularly, that, you know, he's got a thick skin and broad shoulders, and, you know, he doesn't care what anybody's got to say about his decisions. He makes his decisions. He puts his backside in the bacon slicer, as he likes to say. So I don't think there's an awful lot of flexibility there. And again, we go back to players. You know, players want to be educated day to day, but I think also the modern day player wants input. And I think that's, you know, the YouTube video I did last week on Steve Cooper was, you know, about that was the major. He's the same personality type as Chris Hughton, but that's the major difference that Cooper now brings to the table at Forest, is that players will now get input into tactics, whereas Chris Hughton was kind of very rigid about the way he wanted his team to play. And I think we're seeing the same thing with McCarthy. And I think those Cardiff players will have enjoyed at the beginning getting results. And just, it doesn't matter sometimes what brand of football it is you play. If you've got a very effective style that works, and you've got loads of 6'4" centre-backs, centre-forwards who are just marauding into the box and, you know, just cannot be withstood on set plays, then when it's working, they're going to enjoy that. You know, players aren't when we say players want to be educated, they want to further their careers, we're not necessarily talking about them wanting to. It's not all about purist football, but if something's not working, then they want to understand ways that this can be done differently. So, they'll buy into a game plan for as long as it's working, but when it's not working, they want to understand why it's not working. They want some kind of involvement in a process that isn't too rigid, and that either they get some input into or they get some stimulus from in terms of the learning something new. And I think with Mick McCarthy, it's about desire again. It goes back to getting the basics right, getting on the right side of fine margins, and then results taking care of itself. I think what is also worth pointing out here as well, I think there's a seasonal aspect to this. And if McCarthy was to stick around long enough and gets through the next few weeks, I do think the style of football that he wants to impose, if the buy-in is there from the players, I think very much suits the rigorous schedule of the winter months. So I think Cardiff could barely improve from what we've seen so far, yet suddenly become a 2 points per game team for the next 4 to 5 months, because it just, we've got a lot of fresh bodies and fresh minds in the Championship right now because it's the start of a new season. The cumulative effects of Saturday, Tuesday haven't really begun to take hold yet. So people are withstanding what it is Cardiff have got to offer a lot better now than they might be able to in November, December. And I guess, but also going back to the tactics is, there's more teams now that it's not about can you defend set pieces against these Cardiff players in the box. There's a lot more tactical intelligence that can you stop Cardiff getting anywhere near your box in the first place to get those long throws and set pieces and cause you those problems. It's prevention rather than cure. And I think the Championship's evolved to such a level now that what we're seeing is we're barely even seeing Cardiff get into the final third half the time. So this is why it looks so bad. So they've got to find solutions to these kinds of problems and not double down on what everybody knows they are now. Because that they are going to be, 3 set-piece goals against the Millwall defence tells you how dangerous they are from set pieces. But then they've scored so few set pieces since, tells you that they're not even getting the opportunities anymore.
Interesting that Mick McCarthy actually said as well recently, I think some teams have worked us out, which kind of backs up what you said there. Looking at the wider pitch then for a second, Mike, you mentioned we listed off a few experienced managers. Well, Houghton's gone, of course, at Nottingham Forest. Kenny Jackett's doing all right in League Two, but that is a league where sometimes you do need to get back to basics, and experience can really pay off. But elsewhere, some of the others are struggling. Warnock currently under a lot of pressure at Middlesbrough. And then we go back to, Allardyce and Pulis are not currently in jobs. They're often lumped in with that brigade as well. And then some of the very experienced managers in League One as well. Nigel Adkins, for example, one of those who's struggling a little. And, the Cowleys as well, I guess, as well, haven't quite hit the heights that we were expecting yet. But anyway, I guess the wider picture is that clubs are now looking elsewhere. And we have a lot of rookie managers in League Two who are working within a system. Liam Manning at MK Dons doing a brilliant job, relative unknown, no experience in the English game, a criticism that was levelled at him when he was given the job, but fitting into this MK Dons system, this hierarchy, very nicely indeed. Are we seeing a full sort of seismic shift, do you think? A very gradual one, of course, but in which these older managers who want carte blanche, who want full control over everything first team matters, are just not having the same effect, because actually it's proven that teamwork, a whole club needs to be pulling in the same direction.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's several points to this. I think first of all, I think looking at the different types of old school managers, I think a lot of it has to do with timescales, and different managers of different personality types achieve on some work better over a longer time scale and get compound effects over time. Others can come in and find instant answers to problems and find instant solutions just so streetwise. And, if something's not right at a club, they can get it back on its feet really quickly and get things moving forward. But then kicking on a level with the future planning and the innovation, and that becomes difficult. And I think we can lump both Warnock and McCarthy into that bracket. But I think there has been a shift. Generally has been a shift already. I think it probably happened 4 or 5 years ago. And I think what tends to happen is clubs go for the exciting new, the next big thing. initially in a summer when they've got all this time on their hands to plan a new project, a 5-year plan. As soon as it goes wrong, get the firefighter in, get the old guy, get somebody who knows and is immediately going to diagnose the problem and solve it for us, because now we're getting desperate. And I think increasingly older managers are having to wait and fall back on these opportunities mid-season, where they can come in their experience and years of hands-on real-world expertise counts for a lot more in, and we've talked before about the firefighter role and how lucrative it can be in terms of the contracts you get paid if you play that game right, like Sam Allardyce does. So, there's been this shift in the past few years. What I would also say is that if you're a new manager to a new league, and particularly if you're someone like Liam Manning, who comes in with your own ideas, your own philosophy in the way you want to do things, you start an advantage for the simple fact that you can go and research the whole of that league. You can go and research all these different managers behind the scenes, and you can hit the ground running, knowing everything about them and them knowing nothing about you. And the same applies in the Championship to foreign managers that first arrive in the country. They have this, we're going to talk about Veljko Paunovic later, and they have this, he hit the ground running. Nobody had a clue what Veljko Paunovic was all about, but he had a chance to, impose his style on the Championship before the Championship knew what it was, and then it kind of tailed off and plateaued after that. And I think there's this advantage to be had by being an unknown quantity, and it's a lot harder once you've been around the block a few times to outguess direct opponents and to be one step ahead of them. So I think that's another element to it as well. Why and also you can say that the fans buy in. Once a manager's been around the block so many times and managed so many clubs, it doesn't excite the fans as much as somebody new coming in and saying he's our guy. Nobody knows who he is. He's our guy. He's saying the right things. Not, he said this when he was in charge of QPR last year, and he said this 2 years ago when he was in charge of whoever. And it's easier for fans to. It fires the imagination of a fan base to bring in someone totally new who comes in all slick, says the right things. He's got his philosophy in mind of the way he wants to do things and stuff like that. So, it's almost becoming safe to make the sexy first-time appointment than it is to go with the old school guy who, everybody's got preconceptions about. Everybody's got their biases before he walks in, things that fans of other clubs have said and stuff like that. So I think that's why the shift has happened. But also, you've got to say a lot of these younger managers are more in tune with what the modern day player wants. And the modern day player, even in just the past 4 or 5 years, has changed dramatically from the players that Mick McCarthy won titles with over a decade ago.
Very interesting indeed. And taking it back to Mick then, Mike, our final question on him. Let's look forward. Let's see what the future might hold. So you talk about during the winter months, how having an experienced man in charge like Mick might pay dividends. Having a squad that can go direct and often do might also pay dividends. But will he be there long enough, do you think, to be given the chance to show that? And what is it that he needs to do, if anything, that you can put your finger on, that to turn this ship around for Cardiff? Because the fans will not be tolerating a lower mid-table finish this season, will they? They expected a lot more at the start of August.
Yeah, I think Cardiff should be top 6. I think I said that in the last podcast and at the end of last season, and I said it before this season started, and I still believe it now. They've got the tools of a team that should be in the top 6. It's going to be really interesting, and the reason why we want to cover McCarthy in this episode is because it's such a crucial period coming up for them. They've got 2 games now, home games this week, then an international break, then a South Wales derby against Swansea when they return from the break. Now, Swansea are at the beginning of a new process, a sexy, exciting new manager, going back to the style of football that we associate with Swansea. First and foremost, McCarthy needs 2 results. He needs 3 or 4 points from these 2 home games, West Brom and Reading, I think it is this week. He needs results. He needs to stop the rot and go into the international break with a positive mood. But I also think something needs to change in that international break, which isn't easy with Cardiff and the number of players that go away on international duty, to suddenly be changing your style or being open to new ideas and just trying to tweak something to be a little bit more unpredictable and to change the way you play. But then if they come back from the international break and they get schooled by a Swansea team who are very quickly warming to what Russell Martin wants, if Cardiff don't even get near Swansea's goal for 90 minutes and we just see total domination of the football by those Swansea players, who Russell Martin's only been in charge for a few weeks, then it's hard to see McCarthy getting past those 3 games, or it's going to be hard for him to get past that. But he gets the right results in the short term, in those next 2 or 3 matches, and just comes through the other side of the international break with a positive result in that derby. Then all of a sudden, right, well, even the basic qualities of what Cardiff bring onto a football field, the 11 players they put out on a pitch any day, should be worth 2 points per game over the winter months. We're getting into the busy, rigorous schedule now, and this is Cardiff's time as a winter horse to start really generating some points. But this is why it's such a crucial period now. 2 home games, international break, South Wales derby. I think is going to define McCarthy's tenure.